of the economy. Just think about that. They're doing things that do not add value in the real sense of it. And that's the reason why our unemployment rate, even though just 4.2%, that's the same level as the UK, poverty is one of the highest in the world, if not the highest in the world. 133 million people as of 2022, which is most likely must have increased by now, because that was before the subsidy removal and naira flotation. So how is it that you have high employment rates and you also have one of the highest poverty rates? That's the explanation. We have working poor. We need to create decent jobs. Our job is just beginning. And the challenges we face are mostly down to macroeconomic issues, of course, which are triggered in part by politics and also by the policy environment. And the policy environment, I would attribute a huge part of that to three major policies. The first one, in no particular order, being trade. The second one being monetary. And the third being fiscal. If we can address all of this, while we cannot control what Russia does in Ukraine and what happens in the Gaza, we indeed can control, just making it easy for small businesses to earn a meaningful living, making it easy for manufacturers to produce, making it easy for investors, be they domestic or international investors, to find Nigeria attractive enough such that the risk-adjusted returns is competitive. And that is where the Presidential Fiscal Policy Committee comes in to play a major role in this whole picture of the policy environment. So the committee has three major mandates. The first one is fiscal governance, and that's to look at how do we manage ourselves in terms of our finances, in terms of the revenue we generate, how we generate them, in terms of our respect for the rule of law when it comes to fiscal management, in terms of coordination of policies of government, both across levels of the federal government, but also across subnational. How do we ensure that we get out of the way for people to live their lives? The second pillar is revenue transformation. Many of us are aware that we've literally been printing loads of money over the past 5, 6, 7 years to spend. Whenever you print money to spend, you create a very massive problem. One of the reasons why our inflation rate is high today is down to ways and means financing. Because you have the money without commensurate productivity. So, can we generate revenue so we stop printing money? The answer is yes. But how do you generate money when most of your people are poor, your businesses are struggling, but we also know we have a good number of people who should be paying taxes that are not paying, mostly the elite. So we want to redesign that system so that we generate revenue in a way that is sustainable. We actually realize that we can make even more money from efficiently managing government assets and government interest in business entities, far more than we make today from taxes. So the third one, I said three: fiscal governance. Second one is revenue transformation. The third one is the one that excites me the most, and that is looking at facilitating inclusive economic growth and competitiveness. How do we make Nigeria conducive for investment? How do we make Nigeria competitive regionally as well as globally? And in trying to do this, we came up with certain philosophies that would define and drive the direction of Nigeria when it comes to fiscal matters, coordinated effectively with monetary, trade, and other policies. So these philosophies include not taxing capital, not taxing investments, not taxing production, and of course, not taxing poverty. There's not a single country in the world that has become wealthy by taxing poverty. It's actually a contradiction in itself. So the summary, and that's the way Mr. President put it, is that we will not tax seed, we will tax fruits. In other words, Nigeria as a people, we have decided that we will support productivity, we will support businesses, large and small, foreign and domestic. We will support individual endeavors so that they can thrive. And when they have finished thriving, we'll sustain them to even grow and go international. And the taxes we collect at that point will be a small fraction of the success that they have made. Elon Musk in 2021 said he was paying $11 billion in personal income tax in 1 year. I couldn't help myself but convert it into Naira. After converting, and Naira was not even, it was 460 at the time. After converting, I couldn't help but compare it with the amount we've collected in personal income tax in Nigeria. As of 2021, that $11 billion was the personal income tax collected in Nigeria, all 36 states plus FCT, for 4 years. Not one, not two, for 4 years. Of course, Elon Musk didn't pay $11 billion in the US because he loves the US. After all, he's South African, right? But the US gave him the environment to express himself and make his ideas turn into reality. The environment that made him create hundreds of billions of dollars is just so fair that he gives back $11 billion in 1 year. That is what we have to create in Nigeria. We have some action plans. So we said to ourselves that we will not celebrate efforts. We do that a lot in Nigeria. Just imagine something as simple as a government agency will say, we've created a website. We're supposed to clap, right? And then you find out the website and the tech system they've created is more complicated than the manual one. So we will focus on outcomes. So what are the outcomes? We want to increase Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio from about 10% today to around 18% over the next 2 to 3 years without introducing new taxes. Actually, we've identified that about 90% of the existing taxes and levies need to go. So the people will pay less, government will collect more. We are harmonizing the number of taxes, officially over 60 as of today, unofficially over 200. We think all of that should be down to a single digit across all levels of government combined. We're looking at efficient coordination between policy authorities, both at the center as well as cross-national. So we're also engaging now with sub-nationals. We're meeting with some of the governors, and we're just independence from the colonial masters, and we have not done anything about them. Imagine, the Ministry of Finance Incorporated Act is a law of 1959. You read it and you could see the language of the colonial masters in it. And that's the law we're supposed to use to manage our assets, estimated at over 80 trillion naira, which today is being inefficiently managed, idle, in some cases mismanaged. We're writing some of the laws. We're amending those we need to amend all the way to the Constitution. The constitutions were written by us. So if it's not working, we need to fix it. We also thought it would be nice to develop a spending framework, spending and borrowing framework for Nigeria, just so everybody is clear that if you have 133 million people living in multidimensional poverty because they don't have access to education, they don't have access to health, they don't have access to living standard, basic as sanitation, safe, clean water, then we should not build international worship centers when we have no schools. We shouldn't build airports in about 15 states today that can barely boast of one flight a week when we have no roads from the farm to the market. We need to reprioritize. So therefore, we are coming up with a spending framework for Nigeria. Whether your money is small, whether it's big, if you spend it right, you get the right results. As well as borrowing. What should you borrow to do and not borrow to do? So as I wrap up, we have aspirations. So these are our targets. We want to be, and that's why I like the theme of this conference. We want to be the preferred location in Africa and a competitive location globally for headquarters location. We want companies to start putting their headquarters here so that the C-suite will be here spending the money and booming our economy. We want to be the preferred location for technology and research and development, shared services, the creative sector, energy transition, as well as business process outsourcing. Philippines made over $35 billion from business process outsourcing in 2022. I think Nigeria can make more than the Philippines. India made $200 billion. It's a larger economy, but look at it. We speak better English in terms of our accent than the Indians. Our time zone is even better. So maybe we don't make 200 billion. Maybe we can do 20, 30. And some people said in my committee, and we're still debating that, they said maybe we can also be the preferred location for retirement. A report just came out that says we are the second lowest in terms of the cost of living. If you create the right environment, people have earned their dollars, their pound sterling, their euros. However, they find this place as home. So all the millions of dollars they've saved, they come and spend them here. We're still thinking about it. So the call to action, in conclusion, is that you should please engage with us. This is a project that we're doing for the Nigerian people. We have about 75 people who have volunteered their time to make sure that this works. One thing that is good about our committee is it was set up not to write reports, but to also support government with implementation. While we don't have powers to implement, we work with the policymakers to ensure that implementation is done. Share your experiences with us, give us data to work with. We said to ourselves that and there's a quote, actually, I can't remember who said it. It says, in God we trust, all others must bring data, right? We think that if you don't use data in making decisions, the outcomes will be different from your intentions. And then we also want you to please join us in collectively exerting pressure on our politicians and policymakers to implement our recommendations with laser focus, with precision, with a high sense of urgency, without compromising diligence. We think that this is something we have to do together. So don't leave it to us. We're just representing you. We're on a mission, and we believe that the Nigeria today that we see is not the Nigeria of our dream. I haven't met one single Nigerian who says, this is my Nigeria. No. If it's not the Nigeria of our dream, then we have to work together to create that Nigeria of our future and of our dream, not tomorrow, starting from today. Like Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, the Chairman of the Presidential Committee, Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, for that excellent speech. You would agree with me that the role that Mr. Taiwo Oyedele plays is very critical for everything that we're discussing today, and we will need everyone here to give him all the support and comment on everything that he has mentioned today. We need to all give him the support that he requires. So please, once again, a round of applause for Mr. Taiwo Oyedele for that brilliant speech. At this juncture, we would now welcome another goodwill message from Mr. Sean the Clean, the former Special Advisor to the UN Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Food Security, for another goodwill message.
Hello, and it's wonderful to be with you today. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person for personal circumstances. I haven't been able to fly for this month, and so it's meant that I can't be there in person, which is a real shame. But wonderful to be able to engage. I think the timing of this meeting is really good. Building on, I have just stepped down recently as a member of the Executive Committee of the World Economic Forum, and the whole focus around trade and investment has been central to a lot of the work at the World Economic Forum while I was there. It was really interesting. I've also been asked to be an advisor to the Business Day Media Foundation, and who are really behind driving a lot of this thinking and the foresight behind what is happening in this discussion. As Frank Abogan said at the beginning, I mean, Nigeria is at a crossroads. And the decisions that you take in the next 1 to 2 years will be absolutely critical, both for Nigeria, but also in the context of the region. If I just think that 2023 was actually quite a critical year for international trade and foreign direct investment in many ways. On one hand, trade pretty much ground to a halt during 2023 at 0.2%. It was the weakest performance outside of a global recession in 50 years. And so even though global trade is expected to rebound this year, it will only be half of the average of what it was in the decade before the COVID pandemic. And so what we're also seeing is that a lot of companies and countries are also, because of the various conflicts that are going on, are really starting to retreat from global value chains and diverting investment more, say, into domestic or regional supply chains. Now, this is both a challenge and an opportunity for the region. These trends, in some ways, for countries that have traded heavily internationally and relied on that trade, don't bode so well. However, given the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the action that's now seeing unlock in the region, it really is an opportunity to focus on that regional trade. And in addition to that, there were two other developments that are coinciding with this, which could be really key in unlocking that trade. And that would start a new era for that kind of global investment policy and practice. One of those is that there has been, starting at the beginning of 2024, new global sustainability and climate-related reporting standards that have now been introduced that put sustainability right at the heart of international reporting standards, and these have been agreed at the international level. I think the second is what my friend Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala referred to, which is the launch of the sort of landmark WTO investment deal that is coming into force. The WTO's investment facilitation for development is probably the first agreement of its kind at the global level. And the aim is that it will deliver as much as one in global welfare, gains in GDP terms, sort of seeing potentially a 1.5% increase in global GDP, which are exciting numbers, but they have to be unlocked, as she said. And this requires both countries really engaging through this, and what that will do in terms of really looking and putting the spotlight on where global trade could benefit, particularly in terms of supporting emerging markets. But that does require an increase in transparency of investment measures, the streamlining and speeding up of administrative procedures, the providing of focal points for domestic regulatory coherence and cross-border cooperation, and also a focus on sustainable development. And so there will be differential treatment and special treatment for emerging markets, and they can apply to be able to follow that agreement and can implement the framework for it immediately, or after 1 year, as you know, by delaying the ability to be able to implement the measures, but to be able to implement that straight away. Why this is important for governments is investors are going to be increasingly attracted to environments where the rules are clear and consistently applied. What has come out and what the Global Risk Report showed that was released in Davos just last month is that we are seeing an increasingly complex risk framework at a global level. And so for countries to benefit from that trade arrangement, the more that they can be transparent and open about the underlying issues that relate to that trade, the more they will be able to take advantage of it. Upgrading technology transfer, providing better data services, and equally for business, this is going to be important. Transparency and predictability are the bedrock of business case for investment. So if Nigeria and the region want to attract more of that foreign direct investment to you know, as the last speaker said, to be able to see that dream where you're seeing international companies use Nigeria as a continental hub, then they will look to where they can thrive, where regulatory frameworks are clear, minimising the risk of unexpected changes, streamlining of administrative procedures that help to reduce time and cost associated with licensing, permits, and approvals. So one of the key points that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala highlighted was the digital economy is going to be the economy of the future. Investment into digital services now accounts for 72% of the total foreign direct investment stock, with the growth of cross-border investment into services being seen as the long-term trend. In each decade, that has gone up significantly, with a 5-fold increase during the 2000s, another 4-fold increase in 2010 to 2020, and already in this last few years, even with and accelerated probably by the COVID pandemic, we're seeing a potentially doubling of that again, which is significantly outpacing FDI into both secondary manufacturing and primary natural resource sectors. So how do we take advantage of that? And how does the region take advantage of that? Central is going to be data. We mentioned data, and I hope that that comes out very strongly today. There is a critical need to accelerate the shared data facilities, the open, more transparent data that can be shared between countries, of really fast-tracking the kinds of regulations that will allow for those data flows in the region to unlock this emerging digital services focus that is key. I think the other one to think about is also around certification. Certification is going to be critical. It's interesting, I worked a lot on the food space. Potentially agricultural food will be 80% of the intra-African trade, and yet only less than 10 countries in Africa are using e-phyto standards, electronic phyto standards, sort of, that document that goods are safe to transport across borders. These standards are pretty much accepted in nearly every other country in the world. And yet within the region, as I said, there are less than 10 that are actually using these standards. And so, that's just one example of where that kind of electronic facilitation is lagging behind. And so using facilitation is lagging behind. And so using that certification and really fast-tracking that to facilitate market access, to build confidence, to navigate regulatory complexities, and to build global recognition. How does the region become a leader in actually demonstrating openness and transparency in terms of trade, cross-border trade, the kind of certification that is needed to be able to underpin that kind of trade? And so I can't stress any more the need today to really look at that critical sense of urgency. We need to move into an action sprint mode in the region. We need to really unlock at scale a high ambition of how does the region become a leader in digital services that will develop and drive trade in the region, because that digital services component is going to be absolutely critical. I'm excited that as the Business Day Media Foundation, this is something that going forward after this event, they're very keen to get in behind. And as the last speaker said, how can we crowd people in to that collective ambition to really drive a series of action sprints that will unlock the ability of this region to really benefit from those digital economies and really grow and boost trade development. So good luck with the rest of the day, and I'm sorry I can't be there, but very excited by what's happening.
We would now be taking the keynote address by the Honorable Enoti Ebong, Director, U.S. Trade and Development Agency, who will be joining us virtually as well.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Good morning. It is my pleasure to join you from the headquarters of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency in Arlington, Virginia. Let me begin by thanking Business Day for hosting this important discussion on reimagining economic growth in Africa and for inviting me to speak. Though I wish I could be with you in person, I do appreciate the opportunity to address you virtually. When it comes to international trade, I think we should reimagine how we approach Africa's competitiveness. The continent accounts for just 3% of global trade. This number is far too low, and it misrepresents the tremendous level of opportunity that is going untapped. So how do we tap into Africa's trade potential? For good reason, we are focused on promoting continental and regional integration, improving utilization of the AGOA program, and facilitating access to finance for Africa's businesses, including female entrepreneurs and small businesses, just to name a few. I would like to propose that we also bring that focus to high-quality infrastructure, which is foundational for both trade competitiveness and economic growth. Think about some of the essential needs for doing business and for economic growth: reliable electricity, internet connectivity, transportation linkages, and healthcare infrastructure. These sectors are vital to growing Africa's global trade profile. But there is a common challenge in developing this infrastructure for trade that should factor more prominently in our conversations. If you would indulge me for just a moment, I would like to put this challenge into context by sharing with you the mission of our agency. The U.S. Trade and Development Agency supports the development of high-quality, sustainable infrastructure in emerging economies, and at the same time brings U.S. private sector innovation, solutions, and technologies to the infrastructure projects that we support. One of the challenges of developing infrastructure is the cost associated with meeting the lending requirements of financial institutions. Just to give you a sense of scale, before a single shovel is put into the ground, a project developer may face development costs that can easily run into the millions of dollars. As a result, project preparation is often a key bottleneck to addressing infrastructure needs and consequently to growing Africa's share of global trade. USTDA helps to overcome this challenge by providing grant-based funding for project preparation assistance, including feasibility studies, technical assistance, and pilot projects. These are the critical tools that define an infrastructure project's technical requirements and attract financing. At USTDA, we are committed to real action in support of U.S. foreign policy priorities. These include deepening trade relations between the United States and Africa, supporting regional integration, and realizing Africa's immense economic potential. We are putting these policies into practice in a number of ways. Let's start with Nigeria. It is our largest portfolio in Africa and includes over a dozen active projects that are designed to contribute to the country's economic growth. One of our emerging successes includes a project that will help an Abuja-based manufacturer reduce its energy costs by 44% by replacing diesel backup generators with a system that will use solar energy and battery storage technology. Not only will this project enhance the company's export competitiveness, but it will also reduce emissions. In Côte d'Ivoire, we are working with the Port of Abidjan to introduce innovative U.S. technologies that will strengthen its efficiency and operations. This will benefit trade for much of West Africa. In Southern Africa, a USTDA study is supporting a large-scale deployment of battery storage technology that will place Zambia at the center of renewable energy trading across that region. And in East Africa, USTDA funded a study for an internet service provider that will help connect 1 million underserved households across the continent to affordable, high-speed internet. USTDA is proud to support Africa's infrastructure for trade through partnership and collaboration. We work in the spirit of trust, mutual benefit, and our collective prosperity. This is foundational to all our work. We look forward to building new partnerships with you to advance our shared goals. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it was quite refreshing just listening to you talk about the important role you are playing in fostering economic growth in Africa. And I'm sure there are some business owners in the room today who would also be interested in a similar partnership with that Abuja-based company that would help drive energy costs by 35%. Drive lower energy costs by 35%. Without further ado, we are going to listen now to Mr. Olusegun Zaccheaus, the partner PricewaterhouseCoopers, Strategy and Practice, West Africa, for the second keynote address. A round of applause for him as he makes his way to the stage. Thank you.
Everyone, Your Excellencies, and all protocol duly observed. So I'm a consultant, so I have to use slides, right? So the slide is coming up. I think what I would like to do in the next 10 minutes, thereabout, is sort of reflect on the conversation around trade in Africa and the impact on economic growth, and then wrap up by sort of stating a call to action. I think for us, it's very important to realize that any trade policy, trade framework that does not drive economic growth in Africa is as good as useless, right? In going through this presentation, I'll sort of reflect very quickly on the economic context for Africa, and then talk about the trade partnership and its potential to drive accelerated growth within Africa, and then sort of wrap up. Moving forward very quickly. I think we very quickly. An important point we must realize is, if you remember 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there's this bright, rosy picture painted for Africa, right? But it's unfortunate to say that we have not realized that high growth potential, right? And if you look at the numbers, you realize in the last 10 years, Africa has grown at an average of less than 3%, which for me, it's not the good news, right? And if we sort of move forward, next slide, please. What you realize that quite a number of economies are actually also slipping and falling behind when you compare to their performance between 2010 and 2019, which also sort of creates some sort of concern, and that's what this chart is sort of showing you. It's only few economies that are doing good, and those are the ones in green. But when you look at economies below the axis, the red and the orange, they are already slipping behind compared to where they were prior to 2019. This is a sort of concern for us, you know, as you look at the prospect. And when you then look at 2024 and you look at some of the issues African economies have to deal with, issues around debt sustainability, issues around inflationary pressure, which has gotten a lot better, but also more importantly, issues around geopolitical fragmentation, right, which could potentially unravel all the desires and aspirations we have for trade or intra-Africa trade, right? And these issues still persist, but taking this issue, you know, you realize there are a couple of things that needs to be done for Africa to truly achieve its potential, right? And in the heart of that is a conversation around trade. In fact, what has been said is that every investment that grows trade, that increases the share of Africans' global trade, could potentially add at least $17 billion to Africa's GDP. So trade is not just for the sake of trade. It's the pathway to prosperity for Africa. So let's move on quickly and talk about the impact of economic framework for Africa. What we've seen so far, you realize when you look at Africa and you look at internal and external trade, what you realize is that internal trade, albeit it's been growing, is growing slower than external trade, right? And what does that mean? That means we're trading less with ourselves, and then the stats that show that, and we're trading more on external trade. But the sad part of our external trade is most of these is non-value driven trade in which commodity and raw materials are what is being traded. So value addition is really missing. But let's then bring that back to two critical frameworks, and we sort of underscore African trade. That's the relationship between Africa and the US, which is the AGOA Act, right, and the Africa Continental Free Trade, which we talked about. Right, and what I have is just really summarize what this is about. AGOA covers about 32 African countries for now. Obviously, AFCTA will cover all of Africa. You know that AGOA is only targeted at the number of products, where Africa Continental Free Trade is a bit broader than what is covered within AGOA. Moving forward very quickly. What you see, and I'm not going to bother us with this start, right, is that inter-African trade is really, really relatively low where you compare us to other countries, regions within the world. When you then move forward, inter-African trade is really, really relatively low where you compare us to other countries, regions within the world. When you then move forward, what you realize is that under the AGOA framework, right, you realize that trade between Africa and the US are sort of improved, and economies like Kenya are getting the benefit of this intra-African trade, right? But what, as you think about external trade, if you look at the start on the screen, you realize that most of this trade is driven by more of mineral fuels and non-value added goods, right? Which is not the pathway through which trade can really drive economic growth within Africa. But nevertheless, a number of countries have benefited from a framework like AGOA, like this chart on the screen is showing. If I move very quickly to this, around underdeveloped transportation infrastructure and limited cost of access to capital also limits the ability for inter-African trade, to sort of be progressive. And the last bit on the governance is the issue of corruption, which is still persistent, right? So I think as this conversation today, we must recognize that this constraint that every policy framework must aim to address for us to achieve the true potential implicit in better trading within Africa. Next. So what are the points that we think are critical factors we must think about as we aim to enhance trade and, more importantly, get the benefit from trade? There's 6 important points that we highlight here. First important point is strengthening institutional framework. Second bit, which earlier speakers alluded to, is enhancing the quality of infrastructure, especially transportation infrastructure. And we see there's a lot of tilt towards services. We also believe services will continue to be important, as it's a basis for trade. But value-added manufacturing is more important because it's what will create the kind of good quality jobs you need to, get prosperity to happen in Africa, right? I I think another important point that I will mention is addressing the non-tariff fiscal barriers. We sort of limit, even, the ability of countries to trade with themselves within Africa. If I move on quickly to talk about what do we see as the future of trade in Africa, right? There's quite a lot of potential. In 2035, it has been forecasted that intra-East Africa trade could potentially be up to $5.3 billion, growing by about 15%, while intra-West African trade could be potentially $11 billion, albeit some of these geopolitical issues that we're seeing in recent times. To wrap up, what must we do? What must we do to really achieve the true potential of intra-Africa trade? I think from a policymaker's perspective, the first is removal of trade barriers, right? Especially the non-tariff based trade barriers. Obviously, the issue around exchange rate framework, even within Africa, we know the Pan-African Payment Platform is trying to address this issue, but it's still persistent, and this needs to be addressed. And the last bit is around export diversification, which means we're going a lot beyond commodity to other type of goods. And when we talk about firm, I think one of the critical important things as firms, when I speak to my clients and you want to be outbound into Africa, is the local customization adaptation of your product and services, so that as it moves cross borders, it fits the requirement in those different countries. One of the key challenges broadly is also the robust supply chain management, which is critically required for you to achieve your trade ambition. And the last bit for firms is capacity building and creating local partnership in destination countries. In summary, I think there's a huge potential, and facts show that, in both intra-Africa trade and external trade, but there are critical factors that must be addressed over the next few years for us to achieve the potential of trade and for Africa to achieve that high growth within its economic potential. Thank you very much.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like, on behalf of Business Day, to express our profound appreciation to His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who has graciously asked Dr. Jumoke Oduwole to come here this morning to formally declare open this year's series of Business Days Africa Trade and Investment Summit. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I have the rare honor and privilege to invite the representative of the Vice President, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole. Thank you. It's steep. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Your Excellency, the Governor of Jigawa State, Your Excellency Umar Namani. I think time is fast spent, so let me stand on the very well adumbrated protocols. But it's important to say that I bring to you the greetings, the very warm greetings of His Excellency, the Vice President and Chair of the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. I'd like to start by commending the publisher of Business Day, Mr. Frank Agbogun, and his team, along with their partners, for their collaborative foresight in convening this inaugural Africa Trade and Investment Summit for business leaders and policymakers across Africa, aptly themed Reimagining Economic Growth in Africa. Indeed, in the past 15 years, the world has experienced a financial crisis that came dangerously close to being a global depression. The world also faced a novel pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that has yet to fully run its course. And the global economy has been slow to resolve and adapt to the new conditions. Supply chains remain unstable, production is suppressed, and trade costs have increased. The geopolitical competition occasioned by these shifts in international arrangements have sparked tensions and wars, such as the war in Ukraine and the escalating violence in the Middle East by the Israel-Hamas war. International trade is losing momentum globally due to various factors, including the adoption of protectionist policies by leading economists, such as the United States, China, and Germany. These factors have now replaced the pandemic as the primary causes of the ongoing slowing growth in the global economy. According to the United Nations World Economic Situation and Prospects Report of 2024, global GDP is projected to drop to 2.4% in 2024, from 2.7% in 2023, and major global economies are expected to experience decline in GDP. For example, the US GDP is expected to drop to 1.4% from 2.5% in 2023 due to the deteriorating labor force and financial markets. Japan's GDP is to drop to 1.7 from 1.2, to drop to 1.2 from 1.7 due to rising inflation, slowing growth in China and the US, which are Japan's major trading partners, which may result in a curb in the net exports. And China's GDP is also expected to drop from 5.3% in 2023 to 4.7% due to the weakness in its property markets. Now, along with extreme weather caused by climate change and other factors which are undercutting global harvests, low food production and increased food shortages, causing prices and instability to rise, the issues of climate justice remain pertinent, and the future of our own children hinge on our ability to liberate ourselves from the shackles of overproduction, overdependence on oil. Now, putting that global context, putting Africa into perspective, and bringing it home to our own region, the political tensions have spread, with at least, at the last count, 7 coups d'etats occurring in West and Central Africa over the last 3 years alone. And over the weekend, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso announced their intentions to leave the ECOWAS, and which has now been formally convened. Yet, increasingly, although Africa experienced a GDP decline from 3.5% in 2022 and 3.5% in 2023, with tight monetary and fiscal conditions and high sovereign debt, the UN report, again, 2024, has projected that Africa's GDP will increase to an average of 3.3% from 2023 to 3.5% in 2024. While the IMF has also projected that the outlook will be from 3.3 to 4% in spite of the challenges being faced by the continent. Now, why do I go into all this? The IMF is actually projecting that the top fastest growing economies in the world, out of the top 10, the top 6 will be from Africa. And then this brings us to reimagining economic growth in Africa and what that should look like. Having seen what's going on in the world and going on in the region, how should we do business differently? What is Africa's value add proposition? Its people, its youth, mineral resources, arable land. For Africa to perform substantially in global value chains, the continent must redefine business methods that transition its trade from one that concentrates on primary products and raw material exports to competitive value-added goods that meet international standards. This call underscores the need for ensuring African businesses produce with a specified criteria for quality, design, service delivery, and especially appearance that meets international standards. Africa must do business differently, and through this process, it must effectively ensure that value addition is at every step in its regional value chains and overcomes barriers to intra-African trade. We must unleash Africa's food and agribusiness potential. Despite the fact that Africa holds nearly 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, the continent continues to spend its scarce revenue to meet its annual food demands. The AFDB Africa Food Summit in 2023 estimated that Africa's agricultural output could increase from 280 billion per year to 1 trillion by 2030. The unearthing challenges that affect Africa's potential to optimize its food productivity still remain an essential part of this discourse. Africa will receive immense benefit from a focus on African trade in intra-African trade in agricultural commodities and services, and this must be done by unlocking its potential through innovations and investments for increased food production. And the private sector is leading this charge and needs all our support. On the issue of Africa's natural resources and accessing global value chains, until recently, the reference to national income in many parts of Africa was largely on revenue generated from the exports of its mineral resources. The sudden shift in the global economy has been unprecedented, highlighting the necessity for individual countries to secure their self-reliance and economic stability through a keen pursuit of increased export value of their natural resources. Enhancing Africa's industrialization will serve as a critical enabler for the value addition in our mineral exports. Africa should explore more opportunities for value addition and its vast mineral resources and a way of promoting deeper benefits for intra-African trade. Another area is accelerating intra-African trade through enhanced transportation and logistics. AFCFTA's goal for intra-African trade has immense potential for fostering economic growth, industrial development, and regional integration. The challenges to this include inadequate infrastructure, high cost of transportation, logistics and bureaucratic barriers that hinder the smooth movement of goods and services across African borders. The cost of logistics on the African continent is 3 to 5 times the cost of goods and services, and policy options that relevant governments must invest in now to build and integrate safe and efficient multimodal transportation networks. It's inevitable, as well as energy efficiency in transportation systems. A sustained effort at eliminating red tapes at border crossings. The free flow of goods and services across borders should accelerate intra-African trade for the continent's economic prosperity, and critical enablers for single market access include leveraging infrastructure, innovation, and technology. Now, Africa urgently requires secure, dependable, efficient, and cost-effective, sustainable infrastructure to accelerate digital innovation and technological growth. The significant growth in infrastructure for information and communication, according to African Development Bank, has resulted in Africa being the second largest mobile phone market in the world, but broadband coverage remains critically low. Achieving successful advancement in infrastructure to promote innovation and technology hinges on establishing institutional and regulatory frameworks that facilitate access to digital technologies and market platforms. These platforms must be accessible to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and we must provide the much-needed infrastructure to harness and amplify local innovation and drive economic expansion to bolster Africa's competitiveness and productivity. This is the only sustainable way to generate the much-needed foreign exchange. Strategic financing and investment in infrastructure is also key. Depending on loans to fund public infrastructure is getting increasingly difficult for many African economies, and it is time to explore sustainable alternatives. Establishing public-private partnerships is key as the low tax to GDP ratios in Africa underscore the urgency to diversifying funding sources. So what does this mean for doing business differently? For this administration's standpoint, we are now fully committed to creating an enabling space for businesses to thrive. Space for innovation and creativity, enabled by transparency and efficiency of public service delivery, so businesses can focus on doing business, and a change of mindset and strategy. We must give the world the creative and innovative goods and services that are unique to us. So we will enhance productivity and value addition for exports by supporting non-oil exports in producing innovative value-added goods and services that the world wants. And there are numerous unique examples to the continent. There's several successful Nigerian stories. I'm just looking at the tech space. We have companies like Paystack, companies like Main One, companies like Farm Crowdy, companies like Outsource Global. These are all companies that are tech-enabled and have generated thousands of jobs for Nigerian youth, and these models can be replicated across the continent. The government's role is to be collaborative and give open legislative and regulatory reforms that will require the ability to actualize such a strategy. From 1997, China accelerated reforms of its state-owned industries. Specifically, the Chinese government focused on approximately 1,000 major industrial state-owned enterprises for intensive reform efforts. Companies like Samsung, Kia, Hyundai emerged as economic giants in South Korea due to strategic government interventions. Japan and Indonesia have also adopted similar models with intentionality. Driving productivity through reforms is a key focus of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. Through the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, the PEBEC, which I am privileged to chair, the administration is working hard to deliver an enhanced regulatory environment through this systemic intervention and supporting business champions. The new PEBEC Business Champions program is supporting 23 large businesses grossing over $1 billion per annum out of the 345 of such businesses across Africa. Supporting businesses to scale up to the next level, curating policies and driving policies to remove bottlenecks and enable business growth, promoting transparency and efficiency at ministries, departments, and agencies, and improving access to government services. The enhanced productivity is urgently needed and is being delivered by an enabled business investment environment as we support our businesses to consistently and collaboratively sell our creative and innovative goods and services to the world. It is therefore my pleasure to declare this inaugural Africa Trade and Investment Summit open. I look forward to receiving the report on your productive deliberations and collaborations, as well as the concrete partnerships that will unfold. May our collective efforts pave the way for economic growth, propelling Africa into an era of productivity and peace for all. Good morning.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that Madam deserves another round of applause. It was a message from His Excellency, the Vice President, that you would have not missed the passion with which she delivered the message, given especially that a lot of what is in that message relate to the work that she does on a day-by-day basis. Madam, thank you very much. And I must also acknowledge how so readily you are to stand with Business Day side by side. Thank you very much. Let me, at this point, introduce and invite to address us the Governor of Jigawa State, His Excellency Umar Namadi. I will say one or two words about him. You recall I said a few things earlier in the morning. Governor Namadi is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Accountants. He worked as group accountant with Dangote Group, leaving to first be a commissioner in Jigawa State, and without asking, being invited to be Deputy Governor of Jigawa State. He is here with us this morning as Governor of Jigawa State. Governor Namadi is a developmentalist. The core of his life as governor is the mandate he has given to himself to take his people out of poverty. Every day when he wakes up, that is what he thinks about. His primary focus is on agriculture. But he knows that for agriculture to thrive, you must create an enabling environment. You must create an ecosystem that delivers. I am very proud this morning to invite the governor to address us. A politician like no other. His word is his bond. Governor Namadi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. The representative of His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Nigeria, the representative of the governors of Ogun State and Gombe State, honorable commissioners here present, distinguished participants, diplomats, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning still. I am delighted for the opportunity to be among the discussants at the panel of governors in this year's African Trade Investment Summit. The significance of the summit could not be overemphasized, given its potential to come up with far-reaching recommendations that could foster regional economic integration and accelerate the economic growth of African countries and the continent economy as a whole. Given the significance of the summit, this is an opportunity for us to learn and share knowledge, and above all, highlight on the trade and investment opportunities of my dear state, the Jigawa state. It is an opportunity for us to meet and dialogue with the prospective domestic and foreign investors on the abundant trade and investment opportunities in my state, especially within the context of African Growth Opportunity Act, AGOA, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, APARTA. It is an opportunity to establish networks and strike deals that could hopefully eventually metamorphose into a real investment in my state and Nigeria in general. Indeed, one of my strategies for achieving sustainable and inclusive economic growth in Jigawa State is ensuring an expanded role of private sector in growing the state economy. While the private sector plays crucial roles in promoting economic growth and development, trade at whatever level is facilitated by a private sector as well. The public sector only facilitates and ensures the provision of the necessary enabling environment. For us in Jigawa State, I am delighted to inform you, our audience, that the State Investment Promotion Agency, popularly known as Invest Jigawa, which was established under Law Number 12 of 2016, served as a one-stop shop coordination center that mobilizes and facilitates private investment in the state, including the facilitation of trade missions. I am also pleased to mention that over the years, the agency has worked assiduously to ensure the existence of a favorable business environment and investment climate, as attested by the credible performance of the state in the Sub-National Ease of Doing Business Service. Madam is here to confirm that. As part of my introductory remarks, I would like to take this unique opportunity to highlight on some key trade and investment opportunities in Jigawa State. These opportunities abound across almost all sectors, particularly agriculture, solid minerals, commerce and industry, estate development, education, and health. Presently, Jigawa State is the leading producer and exporter of hibiscus in Nigeria, is the second leading producer and exporter of sesame. It is one of the top 3 producers of gum arabic. Also, it is the leading producer of rice, wheat, watermelon, and industrial tomato. In the mineral deposit area, Jigawa State boasts of over 10 different kinds of soil mineral existing in commercial quantities, including precious, semi-precious, metallic, and non-metallic minerals. Specific solid mineral deposits include granite, kaolin, soda ash, copper, and tin ore. Let me say it loud and clear. Jigawa State is open for trade and investment. Finally, one point that I would like to emphasize as we discuss the subject is the imperatives of policies and strategies which ensure that Africa and Africans fully reaps the benefit of ensuring economic growth derivable from trade and investment across the globe and the continent. It is my considered opinion that the continent needs to foster regional integration through infrastructure and policy instruments, ensure collaboration between the public and private sectors across the continent, and accelerate investment in digitalization and leverage on the power of digital economy. Experts have posited that Africa holds some of the key to the future growth of global economy. Clearly, Africa holds the key to some of the most critical supply chains across the globe. The question is, do we have in place as a continent appropriate regional policies and strategies that will ensure the mutual growth and development of all countries across the continent? This makes it imperative to really focus on the development of trade corridors across the countries in the continent as to unlock the huge growth potential derivable from trade and investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that great speech. Allow me also announce that he's not alone. There's an entire delegation here as well from Jigawa State. We have here Alhaji Aminu Kanta, the Honorable Commissioner, Ministry of Commerce, Industry, Cooperatives and Tourism. We also have Inuwa Mohammed Idris, Chairman, Committee on Commerce and Investment, Jigawa State House of Assembly. We have Furera Isma Jumar, Director General, Jigawa State Investment Promotion Agency. And finally, we have Nafiu Halilu, Head of Investment Facilitation, Jigawa State Investment Promotion Agency. So it's a full delegation from Jigawa State, which gives the impression that the state is indeed open for business. Please.
Right, and we're going to take some pictures right now, if this won't be too much of a hassle. We would like to invite Your Excellency back on stage for us to take some pictures, and also we would like to invite the Honorable Commissioner of Finance and Economic Development, Mr. Muhammad Gambo Magaji, up on stage for a picture. The Commissioner of Trade, Investment and Tourism, Nasiru Mohammed Aliyu, MNI, for a picture on stage, and Ms. Julie LeBlanc, the Commercial Counselor of the United States in Nigeria.
Joining them would also be Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, who's representing the Vice President, as well as, of course, Mr. Frank Aigbogo, Publisher of Business Day.
Thank you very much. For a picture on stage, and Ms. Julie LeBlanc, the Commercial Counselor of the United States in Nigeria.
Joining them would also be Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, who's representing the Vice President today, as well as, of course, Mr. Frank Aigbogun, publisher of Business Day.
Thank you very much.
My name is Olatunji Shoti Miri. I'm a performing artist and, television radio presenter and a university lecturer, Unilag. Keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Kenny Black, Africa's finest music comedian, and you're watching Souq News. If you're not watching Souq News, I pity you, but keep watching Souq News.
Hello everyone, my name is Timida Kolo, and you're watching Souq News. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Wisdom Oluwaseun Okoko, co-founder Orbit Africa Properties. I'm live at Souq News. Guys, keep watching Souq News for everything that concerns business, economy, politics, news. Souq News is your station.